Hey guys, Mrs. Karaz here. This is Chapter 21, Section 3, Americans at War. Alright, so while American troops were preparing to enter the war, the Central Powers were making great advances. And from February to April of 1917, German U-boats sank 844 Allied ships. So not only are the Allies losing people, they're losing valuable supplies in this process. So at this time, the Allies are pretty worried that they're going to lose this war if American troops and supplies don't get to Europe quickly, right? They're hurting. They need to be rejuvenated in this war effort. So while they're waiting for the Americans to join the war, European allies come up with a system to ensure that supplies from America could reach them safely without being attacked by U-boats like we saw in the last slide. And what they went to was a convoy system. A convoy is a large group of merchant vessels that sail together. And it's kind of like safety in numbers for ships, right? One ship sailing alone is susceptible to attack. A group of ships sailing together can have each other's backs and can be safer. So the Allies sent small armed ships to travel with their convoys. So if anyone tried to attack their merchant ships, these armed ships could retaliate. And the convoy system was pretty effective for the Allies. They were able to get many more supplies without facing trouble from the Central Powers like they had previously. Alright, so John J. Pershing at this time was put in charge of the American Expeditionary Force, and that was the name given to the troops that were deployed in Europe and were ready to fight. Pershing said that American soldiers would stick together and fight in their own separate units under American control. They would not fight united with other Allied troops. So even though we're with the Allies, we're on the same team as them, we're fighting for the same cause, we have our own coach and we're going to stick to our own players. The Americans are going to fight together, and they're going to be led by, American military commanders, and that'll be that. This might sound to you, I know it sounds this way to me, kind of against the whole point of joining the war and having an alliance. If we're on the same team as them, why don't we fight alongside the British and French? Why don't we take commands from their officers? But actually, this is what President Wilson wanted, right? He said, if we're joining the war, we need to show that we are powerful. We need to show that we carry weight in this war. And the best way to do that, he thought, was to battle independently and show what we're capable of on our own, unassisted by the other allies, really. All right, so the first division was the nickname given to the first American troops to arrive in Europe. They got there in June of 1917. And this is only a few months, right, after we declared war. At this time, the 1st Division really wasn't ready for combat, but that was fine because the main purpose for these soldiers was not really to fight. The 1st Division was really sent overseas to help boost morale for European allies, right? We saw that the allies were being beaten down. They needed to know that help was coming. They needed to know that, there's a chance that more people are joining and we could really win this war. So the 1st Division served that purpose. They helped inspire the allies in Europe. It also helps prove America's commitment to joining the allies, right? We're not just saying we're going to join the war, we're doing it. We're sending men right now, and there's more troops to come, right? It's showing that we're committed to this cause, and we're actually going to fight alongside these other world powers. So let's look at some changes in Russia. So remember that early in World War I, Russians had overthrown the absolute monarch, Tsar Nicholas II. And after the Tsar was overthrown, the Bolsheviks, which were a radical group led by Vladimir Lenin, gained power. Now, the Bolsheviks really wanted to bring communism to Russia. Now, communism is an economic and political system based on the idea that social classes and private property should be eliminated, right? You don't independently own anything. Everything is shared among the entire community, right? No one is higher in class than anyone else. Everyone is ideally, we're supposed to be equal under a communist system. It takes work, obviously, to put a new government in place and institute a new way of being. So Lenin decides he really needs to focus on the problems that are happening within Russia. To be involved in this whole world war does not make sense because Russia itself is in turmoil. So Lenin decides he's going to pull Russia out of the war. We're going to take a step back. So in order to end the war between, Russia and the Central Powers, Russia and Germany sign a treaty. Okay, and this treaty is called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. So this treaty formally withdraws Russia from World War I. Germany's not going to attack Russia anymore. They're out. But in exchange for this really peace settlement, Russia agrees to transfer 30% of its territory to Germany. Needless to say, this is bad for the Allies. So they lost a team member, right? Russia had been fighting with the Allies. Now they're out. And it means Germany gains more territory and is able to move on to the Eastern Front. So Germany sees this as a big win, and they want more wins to come their way. So on March 21st, 1918, Germany launches the Peace Offensive, which is a series of attacks designed to defeat the Allies and give Germany the upper hand. Pershing, with this offensive in place, allowed American troops to go under French control in order to defend against this offensive, right? We're going to work more closely with our allies. As the things are unfolding, Germans are approaching Paris, more and more Americans are arriving to help the Allies. And this brings us to the Second Battle of the Marne. So you remember that the First Battle of the Marne helped establish the Western Front. This is where the Second Battle is taking place. So American and French troops attacked the Germans at Chateau Thierry, which is 50 miles from Paris. U.S. troops were sent to evict German troops from the Belleau Woods, not knowing that the woods were heavily guarded and were really crawling with German soldiers. Fighting breaks out. The Allies suffer many losses, but the bottom line is they win. Later that summer, German troops will move toward Paris again, but again they'll be stopped. So when we're thinking about the so what of the Second Battle of the Marne, we're seeing that we came from behind to claim a victory. Even though we suffered losses, we came out on top, right? And we're also seeing that we've stopped this German peace offensive. We were able to prevent them from getting what they wanted, which was like, let's end the war right here, right now. All right, moving to the Battle of the Argonne Forest. So at this point, Germany's troops are sick, and they're lacking in supplies. Just the way the Allies had been struggling when they were losing a string of battles, the tables have turned. Germany's struggling. And by the way, we're focusing on Germany because Germany is who we were most directly against, I'll say, in World War I. There were plenty of other Central Powers who played plenty of other roles, but in this American history course, we're focusing on us v. Germany. So with Germany's troops struggling, the Allies decide to go on the offensive. We're going to start attacking. And they move into land near the Meuse River and the Argonne Forest, land that the Germans have held for a while. Allies start winning. The Germans begin to lose their footing. We're gaining back land that the Germans had taken early on in the war, and this is really a good sign for us, right? We're helping wear down the German troops, and disease is helping wear down the German troops because they're, literally sick. They're ill. Disease is spreading through the camps. All right, so because they're struggling to such a crazy extent, the Germans call for armistice, or a pause in fighting that allows for peace talks to begin. It's kind of like a timeout. Can we come to terms that will let us end this war, yes or no, basically. France and Britain, the Allies start thinking about what terms they would want for peace. France and Britain create really harsh terms, but President Wilson creates a 14-point peace plan that's based on the idea of international cooperation, right? If we're really harsh to another nation, they're probably not going to act so friendly towards us in the future. The 14 points was how do we do what's right, punish people for their wrongs and praise people for their victories, while still ensuring that we could all get along in the future. But this is, we're looking at the future. We're planning for the actual peace talks in this bullet point, when really we haven't even established an armistice yet. France and Britain become the countries that have to decide the terms for the armistice, And here's what they come up with. In order to pause the war, Germany has to pull troops back from the Western Front. Back up, give us our space, right? They have to cancel the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and give all that land back to Russia. And Germany has to surrender its U-boats to the Allies, right? You're saying you want a timeout. You say you don't want to fight us. Then hand over your weapons. Let's make sure you're incapable of fighting us during this timeout. The other Central Powers are also suffering, right? Like I said, we're just focusing on Germany because it's the most U.S.-centric. But they also want armistice, right? So we need to come to terms for this. Wilson, as part of the armistice, demands that Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany steps down, and in November he does, and Germany becomes a republic. The armistice officially begins on November 11th, 1918, and since all of the Central Powers wanted armistice, right, everyone wants to call a timeout, it's clear that we don't really want to fight anymore. This is essentially bringing World War I to a close. Although it's not official yet, right? We need to sign a peace treaty before anything's official. So looking at the toll of the war, the last slide for today, at this time World War I was the most destructive war in history. 10 million people in the military died. Many soldiers who lived suffered permanent physical and or psychological damage. I'm thinking about that poison gas, especially, that we had looked at previously, that we know wrecked people's bodies. Countless citizens died of disease, starvation, and other causes related to the war. It's not just those soldiers that are going to be affected, right? People at home will be affected too. So we're seeing that the war was not so wonderful, obviously, as no war would be. But we are going to see what happens as we shape the peace in the next section, which we will pick up soon. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.